We have an incredible panel today. Thank you, Ashwani. Thank you, Lathika. And thank you, Rahul, for coming in. I would like to begin with you, Lathika, just like the woman on the panel. And let's sort of celebrate that female entrepreneurship and not to sort of make Ashwani and Rahul sort of feel bad. I think let's get some data and some statistics correct. And just to give you a sense of the bias that exists in the VC ecosystem, there was a fantastic story that was done in the year of 2016, where two female founders were finding it extremely difficult to raise funds. They were struggling. So what they did was they got a fictitious male founder, and they started sending pictures with their signatures. You won't believe the responses to the male founder were far more than to the female founders. So this is the reality that happens in the VC ecosystem. It is just not enough to have a great idea. You're often judged by your gender and not your competence. There are some implicit biases. And why do we have them? Because understand one thing, historically, the workplaces were not made for women. That's such a cultural notion. So then to see a woman coming out and raising fund for a venture is really, really something that you want to test her. I want to start with you, Lathika. It's not that bad and gloomy out there. If you look at the MSME sort of contribution to India, I think women do constitute quite a significant portion of it. And there was sort of some data which actually said that hundreds of $billions could be added to India's GDP only if women could become a much more active contributor to the MSME ecosystem. If this country has to reach 5 trillion economy by 2025, there's no way, and there's no way on earth that we can ignore this very strong female cohort. What do you think, just as an opening statement, is holding female back, you think?
Thank you, Shrija, and congratulations for putting this event together. I think it's a wonderful activity, and thank you to the UK Commission and all your partners. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I've been at Microsoft for about 5 years. Never thought I'd go back into the corporate world, having been a female founder. I was part of a very large startup in the US. We had 300 million in funding, and our claim to fame was that we spent it in a year. Right? It was cloud ahead of its time, and after that I went completely on my own, and have had actually a very interesting journey as a woman founder. And I was fortunate that I did, I raised money from venture about 20 years ago when there were barely any, investors out there. Built the business, sold it, started a business in skilling, crashed and burnt it, and then started again. And in 2016, I started a platform called Sonder Connect for Women Founders. And the reason was exactly what you mentioned just now, which is that why were there not enough women founders who were getting funded, right? And I think it wasn't because of the VC bias as much as the diffidence that women founders had in themselves, right? Because women founders, would, so the classic example, and I've done this, I've got a male co-founder, I've got the female co-founder. So as part of Sonder Connect, we had, the female co-founder was also ex-Goldman, male co-founder was ex-Goldman Oxford, female co-founder was IIT Delhi Quantum Physics, okay? Phenomenally qualified. And it was the male co-founder, and for our Sonder Connect cohort, both, the female and male founder showed up, for the two-day event that we do. And the male co-founder would speak, the female co-founder wouldn't speak. And so then I had to, coach her and say, you are equally qualified, and why are you being diffident? And today she's a different person. So what the point is that we first have to help ourselves before we point to investors to say that they are not investing in us. So over the past 8 years, we've, had about 140 Sonder Fellows. They've together raised over $100 million. Three of them have been selected and funded by Shark Tank. So what we do is we don't invest in the founders. We actually work in doing a deep engagement with them and making sure that they have the platform to network, to get access to mentors, and just be themselves. So that to me is the first part, which is having confidence in your own venture, being able to articulate it correctly, to convince investors that you are sure. I mean, the male founder would look at, and what's your valuation? Without any hesitation, would look at me and say $20 million. Female founder, what's your valuation? I think maybe 5, 8, and I'm like, okay. So I have sat the female founder in one room, male founder in the other room. I'm like, okay, what's going on here, right? So these, I think, are things that we need to work on before pointing a finger at investors to say that there are. So today, if I fast forward 20 years from when I was raising funds to where we are, in India itself, out of 140 unicorns, all right, over 30 of them have female founders. So these are very important statistics to you see. And there are enough investors who are looking out there for really good, solid business plans. So I'm going to stop there and have my other panelists speak.
That's a brilliant point, Lathika, and thank you so much. So if I were to sort of just ask you, what really would your advice be to female founders in terms of strategies? This imposter syndrome, you said, not feeling confident enough compared to sort of a male founder, speak up more. There are a lot of female founders in this room. If you were to give like a 3-part toolkit to them, if you will, what would that really be?
First, believe in your business plan, right? If you are hesitant about your business plan, how can you convince the investor to invest in you? You have to be extremely confident about, what your business plan is. Are you able to grow it? And investors they're responsible to create returns for their LPs. So it's important for them to know that the founder that they're speaking to is confident of giving that return, right? We all know that the rate of success for startups, is between 1 and 5%. So for every 100, startups that are out there, that when I say, again, let me qualify the rate of success, I'm saying in terms of getting the scale that you want. There are very successful founders who haven't raised money. It's not important to raise money, but if you are going and sitting in front of an investor, you have to be able to be confident about the business that you're building and that you're in there for the long run, and you have the agility and I would say the confidence in terms of riding all the ups and downs. So go out there, own your business, right? Be very, very clear who your competition is. Be very, very clear about what you can or cannot do. That is the changing factor.
That's very well put. Go out and own your business. I want to come to you now, Ashwani. I remember we were having a conversation somewhere, and you were telling me that, Shrija, sometimes what happens is that we also encourage female founders to come up and talk, just to the point of what Lathika was mentioning. So why do you think that confidence piece is missing somewhere? And why is it that the confidence has to be instilled to the investor when there's a female investor? Why that confidence is not just coming in?
That's a good question. So let's step back and look at certain things. So if I look at the fact that you have less than 5% females at an CXO level in the top PSE 100 part. Okay. Whereas if I were to look at the colleges which, where everything is in a way the same. So if I go back to even my own alma mater, London Business School, I have about, you would see even in the current batches, about 45% as the gender, female to male part. But if I look at globally, only 2% of the VC money went into female founders. And of them, you had 15% checks were written by female VCs. Okay. So the other question which then comes is that why is it that you have banks, certain financial services, or colleges having a nearly equal ratio, but not so when it comes at CXO levels in large corporations or in terms of founders? So I think it comes down to the fact that while you may have enabling structures in large organizations, you look at ensuring that there's gender equality, you look at ensuring there are enabling factors in terms of leaves during pregnancy, leaves during other events in life. You do not have it from a societal norms. So which is why when an entrepreneur, you're alone. So entrepreneurship honestly is a very lonely space. Okay, it's a tough space. We all celebrate success, but we do not know the pains which go about reaching to the success. So do we have as a society, and that is why I mentioned global norms. So it's not that it's just in India, it's also globally that this problem exists. And that's where those pieces which comes in, whether it is in terms of having the networks. So, so you have terms like, okay, you have a single founder, one-man army. You never say one-woman army, right?
True, absolutely true.
So if you have two founders, if the other one's a female, you still call it a one-woman, one-person founder or two. So there are certain inherent biases which comes in. And you see some of these changes. I was looking at some of the RBI data that when we looked at rural employment numbers, 2017 to 23, the men employment piece went up by, I think, about 68 to 73%, but the women employment went up from 22 odd to 43. So which is practically doubling. But if you look at it, you still have half the percentage not working. Whereas for an economy, like you mentioned, we want to be a 5 trillion economy, you would not have it with half your population not working, not being gainfully employed, not being given opportunity. So it comes down to that when you have biases from a societal norms perspective, one has to know, and where the bias comes in is, and what Lathika was rightly mentioning, that for a female founder, she doesn't know that does she have to be very assertive to be as good as a male, or she has to tone it down. So that right mix varies from people to people because all of us are different personalities. And there's no grooming place which say that, look, this is the right measure when you go and speak to a VC and part. But eventually it all comes down from self-confidence.
True. That's sort of very, very well put. And to the point of what he was mentioning, that when a woman starts behaving too aggressive, then we have those sort of labels for them. Alpha, too alpha. She's behaving like a man. So we have those perceptions inherent in ourselves. Rahul, I would want to sort of come to you. You have any comment to make by far to sort of what Ashwani also put in terms of societal biases and the cultural kind of upbringing that is there? Yeah.
Shreja, thank you so much. It's just, extremely, I'm extremely humbled to be here. Honestly, when I first read about what you guys were doing, I literally told my team, I said, this is one place that I want to be. So first of all, thank you for having us there. I'll try to answer this in a slightly different way. Very recently, my son will soon turn 11, and one of the things he came up and said, I want to have football screening with boys. And like, why just boys? Like, girls are not interested. I said, did you check on them? Yes, there are two. So he has just to set context, he goes to an IB school. There are 2 sections, 20 each, so 40 students in total, almost equal mix. And he said, only 2 are interested. So I said, but why don't you get them in? He said, but they feel awkward. I literally opened this question to my team. We are around 8 people, incidentally, 6 female colleagues. And I said, what's going on? Because some of these subjects hit us hard. Now, let's dissect this, right? Kids going to IB schools. Potentially, you may call that the elite group. Now, what's happening? Why at one end, till the age they are 6 or 7, they are playing together, going together, getting groomed together, and suddenly you see people making these choices, getting segregated as soon as they get into their teenage. Again, we try to bring them together. Some of these challenges are quite deep-rooted, and our characters are a combination of several things. Societies, parents, education institutions, as we grow up, corporate world and others. And we are so glad that the world is now changing, world is evolving. And I loved the point that you made, is we want to see our sisters, our mothers, our daughters empowered, but not want men to be left out. And that's how the world needs to be thought through. It's the challenges, at the ground level, there's so much conditioning that takes place that we start seeing fallouts as we keep going to the next levels. I can say it with some confidence, Shija broadly laid out. I have a side challenge. I've grown up the corporate ladder, and I've seen how some of these biases just start playing out. Perceptions kick in. And I think the most important thing that whether we are talking about gender, disability, sexuality, or anything, it's important to have that deep belief we are all playing on equitable grounds.
True.
We are right there. The ground belongs to us. There is no need to find separate cohorts. We can coexist. We bring our own strengths. We bring our own vulnerability. Then it's okay. Who says men are not vulnerable? Men can be extremely vulnerable. Just that they like to hide themselves in the cave and not bring that out. It's important to understand that we all coexist. We all are equal. Or maan ke dekho, bol ke dekho. Why? And it's all right. I've seen my mother back, struggling with me in the hospitals. My father struggling setting up a manufacturing plant. She dealing bravely out, with labor. Now considered a tough job. But we see that all happening. And but clearly her father told her, you are equal. And these things that kept getting passed on and probably get passed on into us, never felt left out, always said, we are a part of this. Yes, we feel accountable, we are responsible on our deliveries, but do give us that authority. And I think when we put forth our commitment to our accountability and own that responsibility, very rare that people will not give us that authority.
Thanks for that, Rahul. That was really heartfelt, that you sort of put out the own biases that you had to face because of some disabilities. And I think we have truly become the inclusive summit today with sort of getting this kind of composition. And which is why the name, the Equality Summit, like I sort of said, that the opportunities have to coexist. I want to come to you both, Lathika and Ashwani, in terms of biases. There was a study, you talked about questioning, that women have to own up, which said that when VCs talk to female co-founders, they have a very preventative approach towards questioning. They talk about security. They talk about how to safeguard your losses. But when they talk to a male founder, they talk about a promotional set of interview. It's the entire questioning changes. What will be your valuation like? They talk about things which are looking up. And perhaps some of those biases, there was a study by AWS, in fact, which basically said that these biases are leading to women not getting the funding that they actually deserve. For instance, they gave an example. The male founder was asked that, what is your business model? And the female founder was asked, why will somebody invest in you and not your nearest competitor who is doing this? That's a trap. I mean, you're asking the female founder preventative question, and you're asking the male founder the promotional question. So I do exist, while I take your point that female founders have to come and own up, the biases do exist from the VCs themselves also.
100%. Do biases exist? Absolutely. And not just in the investor community. I think it's also, if I was on a panel, and typically I don't get invited twice back to a panel because I tend to be, very, I would say, transparent in what my thoughts are. And the example was, this is, a blue chip investment bank, and the conversation was that what Ashwani just mentioned, saying that why, although the recruiting batch of freshers into that company had 50% women, as you went up, there was only 5 or 10%. And he said, I went for the interview and I asked the girls, and they very bright, and they were very, very clear they wanted to work. And when I asked them about getting married and children, they said, absolutely, even post-marriage. So I just said, stop right there. Did you ask the guys who had come in for the interviews the same question, which is, are you going to, are you going to get married, have babies? I said, that's where the biases start. So the preventive question, I said, you shouldn't be asking that question, right? In terms of whether they will work or not, because that kind of triggers, I would say, a whole slew of actions. What's most important, I think, that especially like in a country like ours, is to understand the social nuances, where, whether it is, there are 3 stages that I have found that women tend to put their career on the back burner. And one is when they have a child, second is when the kid is in 10th standard, and third is when they have adult parents to take care of. If companies are willing to actually help and create programs, I think, to help them through that stage, I think Accenture is a phenomenal company that has, has led the way in terms of creating the programs. Microsoft is actually also fantastic. So I think it comes back from an investor perspective, right? There is no question that there will be this concern about whether the woman will be there through these 3 phases. And if you were to look at why the concern is, it is because they have a responsibility back to their LPs, right? Whether in terms of the investing. So it is important that even if these questions are being thrown, that I will put the onus back on us as women founders to be able to convince them that, I'm here for the long haul. And yes, I do understand about my competition. An area that, so now I have worked with a few hundred women founders, and maybe at my role at Microsoft have met a few thousand male founders, right? At the end of the day, I think a couple of areas that women founders tend to be weak at is numbers. They're not interested in numbers. They get anxious about numbers. You ask them about their P&L, they look to their male founder to speak about it. And the other area is technology, right? So, so these are areas that, technology is probably not as easy to pick up, but numbers is something very, very important. So we will have to, again, coach ourselves to understand that these biases exist. We can debate with or without reason, but when you know they exist, that I think it's better to prep for it and to be prepared and to go out there and be confident in taking the answers. I mean, it's okay. I mean, if they asked you about your competition, I would hope that you knew whether you're a male or a female founder, right?
That's so very, very well put, Lathika. And I think I agree with whatever she said. I do know there was a tweet by a female founder who said that I was pitching to a very I don't want to name the VC firm, and they spoke about marketing to the female co-founder. And when the valuation question came, it automatically went to the male co-founder. Have you also encountered something like that, where females are like, "Humse kyun nahi pooch rahe hain? Why the male co-partner?"
Well, like I said, everything, whether it is a VC firm or any other part. So I'll take it into one is I agree with Lathika that from a VC or PE's perspective, end of day, we are looking at what returns come by. Okay. So you try and mitigate every risk. This is one more risk. Whether some people voice it, some people do not voice it. Let's understand it's a question which is there. It's the elephant in the room. In terms of people having comfort, and I've had engineers, especially on the manufacturing side and others, being very having a lot of discomfort when you ask them on something on softer skills, okay, or on diligence and other parts. So you have the other piece also comes in. And I've also had the good fortune of working in large organizations like ICICI and all, where you had a bunch of smart leaders and others who were very comfortable, female leaders who were very comfortable with numbers, as good or if not better than quite a few others. So so whether it was the organization which had so many people come up, or whether they were inherently good, like I said at the start, that when I look at college level or which are initial parts, you have a near similarity. So it's what we try and think that we are perhaps comfortable or not comfortable. That's an inherent part. So when we look at founding teams, you always look at that. Not everyone would be good for everything. Someone may understand people better, someone may understand technology better, someone may understand finances better. And it's the holistic part which creates value for any company.
So I want to understand one thing, Lathika, and sort of what Ashwani and both of you said, that the reality is that the VC or the PE model is constructed such that we have to make money for the LPs. Because it's the business run off the LPs, by the LPs, for the LPs. We understand that. And to a point which you mentioned, and I have also faced this in my career, that for a woman particularly, the clock of the career progression is completely not aligned with her personal progression. When you are in your mid stages, you become the mother for the first time. That's exactly the time when you're being promoted as a vice president or the editor. It just happens because you're just entering your early 30s and you decide to have a child. And that's exactly when the big promotion comes in. I know of women who have not had the second child, even after having such deep desire to become the mother for the second time. And she actually told me there were vultures standing to take my position the minute I go on a maternity leave. So will we just see a world where there are only men doing startups, raising funding, becoming successful? Because this is the reality. Women leave the workforce, you like it or not. So isn't it imperative now for VC firms to also look at some metrics beyond the burn rate or profitability, to even think like diversity or inclusion or female leadership? Because somebody got to do the job, and perhaps people who have the capital are the best poised to do this. What do you think?
So I'm on the founding board of CXXO, which Bani Kolar at Kalari started. CXXO was started to fund women founders. So what Bani did was take $10 million from her larger fund and said, I'm going to invest in female founders. So here's the good news, right? That we got over 400, I would say, applications, and we've invested in eight women founders. And the criteria that was being used was exactly the same, which is if I were to read the business plan, the quality of the business plan, etc., I wouldn't know whether it was a male or a female founder. So the reason why I say here is the good news is I think that the founders out there have upped their game, right, in a big way in terms of being able to give pitches that are very, very relevant, that meets the investor needs, and it meets all the criteria in terms of investment. So it's not that we are looking at it at a different lens from investment, right? It is equally good or equally risky as it would be if it was a male co-founder. So it's actually a very interesting time in India today, right? 20 years ago when I was building my business, I would keep walking, and since I came from a tech background, I'd keep walking into rooms where I was the only female. Today that's changed. That's changed in terms of the kind of pipeline that is there. I think even in 10 years it's changed. In some ways, if you were to look at it, if you look at male founders coming in from tier 2 cities, getting funded vis-a-vis male founders who came from Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, getting funded from IITs, etc. Those are also biases, right? If you're not from IIT, you don't get funded. You may be equally smart, but you've come from a local college. So these biases are now changing. Definitely, because I see the entire spectrum of startups, just not in terms of women founders. So the good news is that funds are ready to invest. If I were to go to, so Kalari is actually carved out this. If I were to go to Bloom or Peak 15, and Accel, etc., they've all are funding women founders. So that's the good news. Right? You have a great pitch, you have a great idea, you have built a business, you've got product market fit, everything that's relevant, it fits in place. I think those biases are slowly, coming, are reducing. Where the bias continues, which is no question, is that if it's a fresh idea and you're part of the bro club will fund you, right? So there is no sisterhood as yet.
There's no sisterhood
So the minute the sisterhood starts, and that's what we try to do with Sonder Connect, is right? Create that sisterhood of mentors, etc. And that's where, events like this are very, very important and relevant, because it's not just having this session. The reason I started was I would have this, I would be on a panel and then I'd walk away, right? So it was a question of how do you kind of bring it together and continue that engagement with the founders. So that's where we need to do, all of us need to do our bit in terms of creating that sisterhood.
That is sort of very well put. I just hope sisterhood continues. At this point of time, I would like to take questions from the audience. Yes. Any questions, please? Yes. Yes, Ajita. And then I will sort of get into the concluding and the rapid fire and then conclude the panel.
Yeah, I'll try to speak as loud as possible so hopefully everyone. Thank you. Thank you all so much for that. And it's really interesting to hear your views, because they're actually quite similar outside of this particular space as well, right? Some of the challenges that women face are challenges that women face in lots of different sectors, in lots of different countries. I was going to ask a question to Rahul, if I might. I thought some of the things that you said are essentially around allyship, and they resonate with me as a mum of a 6-year-old who also wants to play football and sometimes doesn't get invited. And I wondered if you might say a little bit more about the role of men in this. So not necessarily in a particular place, but the things that men can do in order to create the right conditions for women to be successful. So often it's women at the forefront, like Lathika, you're part of this group, you're focusing on women, but the role that men can play in this space, it'd be quite interesting to hear a bit more about that.
Sure, thank you so much. If I've got the question, you want to understand how the kind of role the men could play to bring. Let me try to bring a perspective from what we are trying to do as a firm. Probably that will answer that. At Valuable, with $100 million, where we call ourselves an inclusion-focused fund. and the way we think about it at a base level is we look at businesses that are UNSDG aligned, so we stay away from certain sectors. And scale, return, and sustenance are non-negotiable for us because, as Lathika said, at the end of the day, we care to make money. We believe that grants and mediocrity are great, but they also fuel they also fuel fallouts. Now, what then gets relevant for us when we think of inclusion is not just businesses led by a particular diversity groups, but businesses empowering diversity groups. Now, put that to perspective, if Ashwani today is setting up a business which is, which let's say is doing biodegradable sanitary pads, which is scalable, return-led on sustenance basis, absolutely will back it as much as, Lathika as a founder wants to come up with a great business idea. But what next? We believe that the way societies are getting shaped, and we all talk about culture, but how do you bring culture into your thought process on a daily basis? Now, what is culture to us? Our behaviors, our action turn into behaviors, behaviors shape habits, habits shape culture, and culture shapes society. Now, what do I mean by that? What we are trying to do, we are trying to bring a parameter, while we all have heard about ESG, we are trying to bring a parameter called culture. Now, interestingly, there are certain capabilities that exist in the world whereby, how do you start? So, if I'm putting out money behind a male founder, how does this male founder really think about each of these parameters? What does social really mean to this person? Is it, I just want to have women in the front or persons with disability in the front because I have to create some tick boxes? Or do you really passionately feel about it? You really see the market? You really see an untapped opportunity? As I said, there are ways, capabilities to do this. If we are able to gradually keep showcasing that it's not just a consumer segment or tapping into some of the capital providers who like it, but there's actually merit in doing it. It's now a very established fact. We've got friends from Federal, Bandhan and others. There's enough and more to establish that women co-borrower is a great thing to have. Because you know that it brings better accountability into the ecosystem. So with this, with our male founders, we are able to constantly move them to think about this in a practical way. Rather than bringing socialist angle, no, there's a capitalist reason for you to do it. And then, of course, we all have to lead it by example. And again, we have not had women working in a firm because we really wanted to make a statement. Well, they are there because they are in the merit pool. That's it. And if these kind of thought process, and that's why we say it's a 25, 30, 50 year or 70 year kind of a journey. We are not in a lala world where everything is going to change as of yesterday. With the kind of efforts that have gone in, banking sector today represent a very solid women pool. Federal, as we said, has got 40% plus. Women entrepreneurs are gradually getting up there. And if we keep going, the other biases will keep coming down.
Thanks for that, Rahul. Ashwani, you want to make a point? You want to say something?
Yeah, quickly. So if we look at it historically, studies have proven that the more diverse management teams you have, the better your decision making, and especially even on the gender side. So that's a proven part. But we should also look at one thing that while you're trying to bring about diversity, you should not. It should not remain as something which requires a prop or a crutch. Why I'm trying to highlight this danger is that it should not be that if I'm doing impact investing, I will do an ESR, I'll fund a part. It should be part of mainstream investing. Okay, you've had examples. You have Lathika, who's years back gone through this part, is successful in her own right. You have Deena Mehta ji in a broking side in an industry, becoming the first president of Bombay Stock Exchange. You have people like Vani and Shivani Basin who are on the VC side who have come up on it. So if you are capable, you're willing to push, you would find success irrespective of the gender. And that's where I mentioned that it has to be part of mainstream, because then you have more money, more opportunities coming in, more sectors which open up, rather than saying, oh, let it be part of ESR, ESG funds or impact funds.
True, it has to get as mainstream as possible. I would take one more question. Women, please speak up. That's exactly the point which Manisha was saying. You have to come up and present your case. Yes. Let's take one more question and then we'll conclude this panel, please. This is entirely for you all.
Hello. Yeah, hi, lovely conversation. It's empowering and inspiring. I come from a sailing background, so I thought I'd just give a quick sailing input and ask a question. The Round the World solo just got concluded. Round the World solo non-stop. The person who won, a woman from South Africa. Okay. Never done before. The youngest woman who sailed non-stop solo around the world, not in racing, 14-year-old woman. So, okay, so there is a lot of capability, but I think everybody said really wonderful things. The discussion has been authentic and candid. It's been amazing that you brought out the elephant in the room. I think rather than talk about the issues and the challenges, women bring some exceptional qualities. I feel that as a woman. I think there's a whole yin and a yang, and the whole, I really resonate with what you said, purpose-driven. And there's vision, and there's purpose, and there's certain values often. I'm not saying men don't have it, but I'm saying women value those. Women come, why does a woman leave her outstanding career to, take care of the kid and the 10 standard? There's such a high sense of responsibility. Turn it around and look at women as bringing certain qualities that possibly are so innate that they can make that business succeed long term, make it more sustainable. And I believe that a lot of the men sitting on this side, some are very evolved, are uncomfortable often when women talk. I know when I go, I'm always told, you're so passionate. I mean, I say, what's wrong with that? I mean, is that a negative? I mean, it's my passion. I mean, that's what I am. That's how I express myself. I'm a woman, for God's sake. I express like this. And men need to become comfortable with women who express, not label them as assertive or passionate, okay? But that's true passion. Don't you look for passion in your entrepreneur? You just look. I buy your point, Lathika, numbers, things you have to learn. But some things come naturally to women, maybe people engagement, mentoring. And I think if I was an investor, I'd look for that quality that the woman brings innately and therefore back it. And maybe that's something that needs to change. And just a last point, I often realize that a lot of the men I worked with in corporate India all had non-working wives. And, no, sorry.
That's a brilliant point, yes.
It becomes very difficult. The bias comes from there. If you had a blooming working wife, you'd see how she can manage the wife, the kid, the mother-in-law, and the dog, and the business. You wouldn't have that question. And I think that's when society changes. If women married men younger than them, the men would have to put their careers on hold.
Okay, that's quite a statement coming in. Quick rapid fire. So I'll begin with you this time, Ashwani. Okay, name the most overrated startup in the country right now.
Ouch. Okay. I think I had mentioned that, the earlier part would be housing.com before they corrected the business model, and Baiju because of certain investment decisions in it. So that's.
Lathika, the same question for you.
I take the fifth.
You can't take the fifth. You have to name one, at least. Come on, you're an investor and such a good one at that.
Unfortunately, I know a lot of confidential information. So I think he's mentioned the one which is in public domain. But more than naming one, I think what's most important is to realize that governance is something that has really fallen through the cracks, right? So whether it is housing, Baiju's, etc., the VCs also are responsible as to where we are right now. okay, in terms of an overhyped and things that are not working. It's a two-way street between the founders and the investors. An investor can't look and say, you know, oh my God, I had no clue what was going on. And you're like, really? You know, aren't you at the board meetings?
Absolutely.
And
You
don't
got to
you
take
know?
responsibility.
So it's unfair to now go and really go after the founders. I think VCs have to fess up. VCs are not fessing up in some ways, and I think that's the challenge where we are from a you know, overhyped, underperforming startup scenario.
Coming from a VC, such a revelation that VCs need to own up. Ashwani, I hope you're listening.
I'm very much, you know, on a more serious note, you know, when we talk about corporate governance, we talk about large companies, listed companies, but unless we have it at the start of a system, which is at the early stage companies and others, when these companies become large, if you have not had it, you know, it's like giving the right guidance to a kid when a child is growing up. Similar thing is for a company. So if you do not have the founders understanding the reason of corporate governance, the reason of having accountability, transparency, somewhere it comes to bite back. So you can't shelve it and then say, oh, when it flies up, that how did it happen? Well, it was all in the making.
Rahul, the same question for you. What would your pick be?
But I think they've answered it, so put me on an easier one now.
Okay, if you were to name one female leader you would want to go out on lunch with, what would that be? Somebody whom you find very inspiring.
One of the names, probably, I don't know how many people know, but in fact, I'll say, you know, Lenskart, we've all seen Piyush. How many people know that his co-founder, his sister, wheelchair-bound, rank holder chartered accountant, and give all VCs and Ps run for their money? Very rarely you come across a person that a large private equity is hesitant to ask questions because she'll just drop numbers at the back. She knows her numbers at the back of her hand. So absolutely, I want to meet Neha, an unsung hero. Phenomenal person, and what a business they've done.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for this incredible panel. Thank you, Lathika, Ashwani, and Rahul, for being so candid, coming to such conversation. Thank you so much. Yes.